Welcome back to the I Empower podcast, where stories become art and where art becomes important reminders. Each episode dives deep into the story of a special person who discovered their power against all odds. All of the inspiration that comes from the stories is then memorialized into a single unique painting that could be purchased in limited print quantities. I do want to say real quick that today's episode could be considered sensitive for some listeners, so please keep that in mind. Let's listen in.
Some days are more challenging than others, but I've also recognized the fact that I'm human and I'm going to have bad days. And sometimes even just getting up to just take a shower and brush your teeth is a huge victory.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's all about celebrating the little victories. And, the following day is a new day. So it's all about just kind of living in the present moment.
So hello, Desirae. I'm so excited to have you on today. I actually found you on TikTok. You are a mental health advocate and a trauma support. So yeah. I'm super happy to have you today. I can't thank you enough for agreeing to be on the show. So tell me a little bit about yourself so that we can introduce you to the viewers.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here to share my journey. So yeah, I guess basically, I was on TikTok and I just wanted to share my story, just my story of growing up in a traumatic childhood. And then along the way, I like to share little tips and things that have helped me along the way. And in doing so, I've found that a lot of people have actually had sort of similar upbringings or maybe not realized that they were suffering.
That's awesome. Yeah. So tell me, so you're on the west side, right? In California? Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yes.
Very good. So yeah, so if you're ready, like we'll jump right into it. I want you to share your story and then, we'll talk about some of the things that you've got going on.
Okay. So basically, I grew up in a traumatic childhood where I was neglected due to mental illness and addiction. And it actually took me a while to recognize addiction as a mental illness. I think just because I was surrounded by it, I just was like, oh, that's a choice. It wasn't until I pretty much self-educated on the subject that I started to see that connection of how it connected as more of a mental illness, just because anybody out there who is actually suffering with mental illness, they know that sometimes these things will sort of have this sort of control over your life, and it can lead people to losing their jobs if they're severely depressed, or there's an array of things and examples, and addiction is one and the same. Right. It pretty much ruins the person's life and honestly everybody else who's connected and surrounded by that. Yeah, that's how I kind of came to the conclusion that it is in fact mental illness.
Right. And I think a lot of people, I just want to touch on that really quick. A lot of people, maybe ignorantly, I know there's been times when I'm on Facebook or, that's usually the culprit for things like this, I guess, because you can just kind of like say what's on your mind a little easier. And I've seen where people have talked about addiction and maybe they've never experienced that personally. And so it's easy for people on the outside to judge when they haven't really experienced it like firsthand. And I think that that's one of the big things that a lot of people don't realize is that addiction is an illness. I don't necessarily know that I believe it's a choice. I think it's how the cards fall sometimes. And then, and then it can just very easily, very sometimes quickly, sometimes not quickly, just kind of get out of control. And then until you realize that there's an actual problem there, it's hard for you to, to navigate that. And then seeking out the help, of course, it takes so much strength to do that too. So, so you say that you experienced, I'm just going back from some of the videos that you've showed. You had a parent that struggled with addiction, and that that circumstance unfortunately left you in a neglectful situation. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What was that like
Yes.
for you?
So basically, I'm the oldest of seven. When I lived with my mother, there was five of us. So me being the oldest, a lot of times, well, in the beginning, everything was fine with my parents, but because my dad had severe mental illness and addiction problems, I think my mom, being so young, decided like, hey, I'm kind of feeling left out. Like my husband's partying, I'm stuck here with the kids, and
Right.
she soon followed, and that's what kind of led her on her journey. But in doing so, eventually our family did break apart. So we moved a lot as children, which for me was very, it was always this frightening sort of experience. I was always afraid of school just because I had moved school so much. And I'm sure like a lot of people can relate when you're brand new to school or you're there on your first day or whatever, you kind of feel this like uneasy, unsure, scared feeling.
Right,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, so for us, they recorded that we had went to 15 elementaries. So
Wow. Oh
yeah,
my
that's a
goodness,
lot.
yeah, that's a lot for a child to go through.
So I always had this constant fear of I'm the new kid. I don't have friends. I don't know who to talk. Like, you know what I mean? So that was
Yeah.
always unsettling. And I know that part in living with my mother, she would leave us a lot and go party, and I hated it. I remember me and my brother, who was a year younger than me, would like hold on to a part of our mom's body
Yeah.
because once we fell asleep, she was out, and then we never really knew when she was coming back. Sometimes it was a week, sometimes 2 weeks, and so like that was always scary and unsettling. Yeah, I just feel like as a child, I was very quiet, reserved, cautious, just very hyper vigilant, and yeah, I just always had this fear. So yeah,
Right.
that
So you're saying that if you don't mind me jumping in there really quick. So you said you have seven siblings or you're the
right,
child of seven. So were you the oldest or and so you were
yeah,
kind of taking on that
yeah,
parental role
role,
to try to
right,
take care of your siblings on top of the fact that you probably from what it sounds like to me is that you didn't have that support system with
right,
school and friends because you were moving a lot. So I can imagine
exactly.
that that was extremely difficult for you.
Oh yeah, I was definitely the girl that always cried every day when I got dropped off. And
Aw.
I honestly didn't care. I obviously had like attachment issues at the time. And it's something that honestly you don't outgrow. It's just something you learn how to cope and reparent. I mean, that's what I practice a lot of is just like reparenting myself and
Yeah.
pretty much learning the things that I was never taught,
Right.
which in return always kind of made me feel uh, a little left behind compared to everybody in my age group. I felt like everybody was thriving, but over here I was left trying to figure out how to cope with my emotions because it's like imagine, I'm sure you've heard of the Jungle Book, the little story of
Yeah.
Mowgli and everything.
Yes.
So it's like when you're that sort of child, like, obviously my life wasn't that severe, but it's like when you're this child and you're hidden away and then you're kind of all of a sudden thrown into a regular society, it's this culture shock. I
Right.
remember going into the subway for a first time and I was like, how does this work? And,
Yeah.
like I felt so out of place. Like, I don't belong here. This is so weird. Like, can they just make my food for me? Like, I wasn't used to making decisions for myself in that way.
Right.
And there's just like so many things where I had to learn how to adapt and pretty much, I guess, learn how to be a functioning member of society. And for whatever reason, I just always knew that the sort of lifestyle that I was introduced to as a child was something that I did not enjoy or anything. So I knew that that wasn't something I wanted for myself. Because
Right.
I know a lot of times what happens in these sort of situations is it's what's known as generational trauma, and it gets handed down from generation to generation. So, substance abuse, whatever it may be, these things get handed down. And for whatever reason, I just kind of knew within myself I didn't like it. It made me very uncomfortable, and
Right.
it wasn't something for me.
Right. That's awesome that you were able to realize that that you could make the difference in your life, and I think that it's a you hear a lot of people talk about product of your environment or product of your upbringing, and so when did you have that moment where you were like, okay, I want something different for myself, so kind of going back to your story of you being neglected, what age, what were you when that changed for you or got better? Did it, if it
Um,
got better?
for me, I guess I kind of had this realization pretty young, and a lot of children who grow up in traumatic experiences or environments, a lot of times what you'll hear these children are told is, "You're very mature for your age. You're very wise."
Yeah.
It's not that they're that way by choice. It's just that they're kind of
Right.
robbed of their childhood.
It's not
So
necessarily a compliment, and I think a lot
yeah,
of
it's
people use
just
that, and you're like, it's not,
it was something that I was always told very young, like you're mature, you're well behaved, you're very wise. A lot of my friends, I'm definitely the friend that everyone goes to for advice. Uh, but I guess I could say there was a point where I had moved out of state and we came back to California. And where I was living in California was San Bernardino. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's like one of the worst cities like ever in the United
Oh wow,
States.
no, I haven't.
Yeah,
What makes it a bad city?
it's just horrible because there's so much drugs on the streets, a lot of gang violence, a lot of murders. There's not really a whole lot of police force, so there's just a lot of, I guess, law breaking that goes on. So living in that environment was very scary. I remember like one point there was a guy who was running down the street because some guy was chasing him with like a machete, and
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
And to experience that as a child, I can imagine.
yeah.
I
So
can't even imagine what you were thinking or how that was for you.
yeah, so it's definitely like a very chaotic, crazy environment. So yeah, I just remember coming back to California and back to that city, and I remember looking at my mom, and I think I want to say I'm like in second, maybe third grade, and we're walking down the street, and I'm just like, "Mom, like it's scary here." Like I don't know, like there was just this gloom, this heavy, and I think that's where I kind of realized like this isn't right. There's something going on. Uh, but all in all, overall, I would say my life started to change and get better maybe a few years ago for the best. It wasn't. It's just been like such a long journey. I didn't escape from these environments until I was actually 18 and moved out on my own. And from there, that's when I kind of sort of began my healing journey. It didn't happen overnight,
Right.
and I didn't even
Oh yeah.
recognize that I needed the healing at
Yeah.
first. But yeah, so living with mom
That's
was
amazing.
crazy, and then we lived with dad, and then that was also crazy. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I seen some of the videos. I'm gonna link
Oh
your
yeah.
TikTok to the podcast, so everyone can go and check out her incredible story of overcoming some of the things that she had to deal with as a child. Um, you talked about, so you lived with your mom and then you went and lived with your dad, and then
Right.
that wasn't, were you thinking that was going to be better? That wasn't better for you. You went from kind of like a rough situation to another rough situation and started
Right.
dealing with other things in that situation. Um, so yeah, can you tell us about when you say neglect? Can you tell us about what you experienced?
Yeah.
What, lack of food, I think lack of clothing was one of the things that you
Right.
talked about in your video.
Yeah. So with mother living with my mother, like I said, she was pretty absent. I hadn't learned how to cook ever, so I know in the video there's a lot of negative feedback as well for me being age 10. They're like, oh, I could have done this at age 6 and all of that.
Yeah,
Which
I didn't even read the comments because I know how
yeah,
sometimes those can be. I'm just like, I watched your video and I was just taking it in for myself. I think everybody always has an opinion of, well, you should have done that, or you
right,
should have done that, or I could have done this, or I could have done that. But like, you have to
yeah,
realize that everybody's circumstances are different. Everybody's, just.
yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy that you were even getting negative feedback on that. But I'm interested in, your story, like what it was like for you. Because then I want to talk about like how you were able to break
Heal,
free from that. Yeah, and start
right.
the healing process.
So, just basically living with my mother, I was actually sexually assaulted by another child, which
Wow.
is something that I had never told anybody growing up. It wasn't until I was an adult that I actually like spoke out about it. But it was just something more that I had buried due to shame, which is something that a lot of sexual assault survivors undergo and kind of deal with, is the whole shame of it all.
Mm-hmm.
So I had that. Yeah, and then just like the whole neglect was lack of food, lack of clothing,
Right.
lack of bathing. We had like head lice. We had like scabies from skin conditions, and we were just like very almost feral children, because the only other interactions we really had truly was going to school, which we did also miss a lot of school. So my mom actually did get in trouble for that and had to like go to jail for that
Oh
because of the
wow.
lack of school that we were missing. Uh, but yeah, we were pretty much fending for ourselves. Because there were five of us, we learned how to like scout for fruit trees, or I would save money so that we could go to like the local liquor store to get us like chips or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, we were just always trying to figure out how we were going to eat. I really pretty much took it amongst myself to, I guess, be that parent role. They call them
Yeah.
parentified children. That's what they're
Right.
called when they take on that role. So I was definitely a parentified child. And that's just like a whole other thing where you have to work out, because I wanted to save everybody. And it wasn't until I was an adult, like a few years ago, that I kind of came to this realization like, hey, I can't save everybody, because unfortunately, in my situation, some of my siblings have succumbed to the environment that we grew up in, and unfortunately are repeating history and taking on that generational trauma in a totally different way than I am.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's an amazing story um, that you were able to survive the way that you did, and the fact that you're sharing that with people, like I give you all the praise because I
Thank you.
completely can imagine. I think it takes a lot of courage to talk about uh, childhood trauma because for many reasons I can't really connect with that. That's why I want to learn and
Right.
understand and be more sympathetic. And I think that's one of the big things that the world needs is more sympathy and understanding.
Right.
And then realizing that healing looks different for everybody, and it takes time. Um,
Exactly.
so I wanted to talk about what it was like for did when you went to school, because you hear a lot of children that go through situations like this, and we're sitting back and watching and hearing these stories. We're wondering where the people that are supposed to
Oh
be like
yeah.
our safety nets, I guess is a good way to call it, school
Right.
counselors, school teachers. And you hear a lot of stories of where children do fall through the cracks and things do go unseen, for whatever reason. I know that teachers are overworked, and they just focused on taking care of the children in the classroom. But how do you feel? Do you feel like there was like that you guys got your situation was kind of missed in that aspect of you
Yeah.
talked about having the head lice and then the scabies and the skin conditions, and then not really having clothing and not bathing. Did anybody ever as far as school goes, recognize those warning signs and help you? Like, how was that for you?
So, I feel like we definitely sort of slipped through the cracks. Well, we actually did, in fact, because we did have CPS cases, but we were never taking away from our home or environment. I know a lot of times with the child protective services, they want the children to be with the homes just because uh, with that whole thing, I don't know. I just think like it's such a larger issue,
Right.
like there's no funding, there's not enough foster parents. There's
Absolutely.
also neglect and sexual assault that takes place in those environments as well, unfortunately.
Right.
Um, there's just so much that it is very easy for the children to slip through the cracks. And I believe that because of the city that we had mainly grew up in and all of that, maybe it was just that it wasn't just us. Pretty much majority of the children in that area were we were living in a poverty situation, and a lot of the children were neglected because unfortunately a lot of the parents in that city that I was telling you, their parents were actually the same as me. So
Right.
that's why when people comment like, "Oh, that was my childhood too," or "This is like giving me flashbacks," I'm not surprised because I feel like every single child in that city and every single child that I went to school with was, in fact, living a similar, if not worse, case than myself. So I could definitely relate to the children. It was a sad situation, and I think
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where it's so large on a larger scale, and so it's so overwhelming
Right.
that there really isn't much you can do. And another thing that I believe is maybe when people see it so often, they become desensitized to it. And it is sad, but it's like you can't save everybody. And I kind of
Right.
feel like that's sort of what happened to us. And even in my personal situation, I did have family members, cousins, and things like that who were taken away. So I got to see that the boys and girls were separated, and I was introduced to that way of life very young, so that always made me fearful
Right, because
and
you're automatically wanting to, I
keep
could
my
see where
family
you want to keep
together.
your family together, yeah,
Yeah,
and you probably are at a point where you feel like, you trust yourself, and I feel like I can at that age and doing what you're doing, you probably felt like you could take care of them, and the fear, like you said, of
right.
losing your siblings and not knowing where they were or if they were being taken care of, because there's definitely some holes in the system, for sure. That's
Yes.
that's an incredible story, and an unfortunate one that I could see where you're saying that the school system is not noticing that there's an
Right.
issue there because it's the norm,
Right.
unfortunately.
Right.
Wow. Wow,
Very sad.
that is so sad. Like, I don't even have like words, just
It's a
because
heavy thing, yeah.
it is, and you're such an incredible person for sharing that with everyone. So when did you become at a when did you decide that you wanted to talk about this and that you wanted to share your experience, and what
Um
are your motivations behind that? Just yeah.
I guess when I was in my early 20s, I got my like first real job. I mean, I had other little jobs prior, but in that environment, I was surrounded by hundreds of people. And I don't know, I guess I just started speaking to them and I started to see things and make connections. And I started to realize that everybody has trauma.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I do talk about, like with my own therapist and just in my own education. There's no way that any one person or child can ever escape trauma. You're going to experience it, unfortunately, at some point in life. The only difference being is sometimes people won't recognize their own trauma. And what I've seen actually happen a lot is they hear my story and they're like, well, I thought I had it bad, but I guess since my life isn't like yours, then I shouldn't complain. And I always tell people, no, that's not, trauma is not a competition. Trauma is
Right.
trauma.
Right.
And trauma is different to everybody. So if it's valid for you, then it's valid. Uh, even in my situation, for example, growing up with 7 children, we all were growing up in the same circumstances. Maybe I see it as a darker, heavier experience while they see it as it wasn't such a big deal. Like, so
Right.
everybody's different. People are more resilient than others. Some of us are more emotionally sensitive than others. And so, yeah, I just think that there's just that whole trauma thing. And a lot of times, like I said, people will dismiss their own because they see mine or vice versa.
Right. And like your important message behind that is everybody's experience
Is
is
valid.
valid. Yeah,
Right.
and the way you feel about it is valid. And
Right.
like, like I said earlier, healing starts and is so different for everybody. When would you
Yes.
say that when you realize that, that there are, I guess my question is like in the thick of it, like when you're this child that is taking care of your siblings and you're experiencing, being left alone and, trying to to forage for food, I guess is probably the best way to say that. When did you realize that there was something wrong? Did you know that there was something wrong when all that was going on, or did you just assume that this is kind of like how some things go, and this is mom's just going out for a little while, and you say that she left for extended periods of time
Right.
during those times, like yeah, my question is did you realize when you were in the thick of this struggle that you were actually struggling, or how did I'm just trying to think of what, at a young age, like what
Right.
your mind's processing at that time.
Honestly, in this time, I didn't think anything was out of the ordinary. To me, this was just a regular, normal day. Um, I guess I didn't realize it until I actually, in fact, moved away with my father and people brought it to my attention. Um, Even my dad's schizophrenia. I grew up with my dad who's schizophrenic and also an alcoholic. I didn't even realize that the things that he was doing or saying or believing were even out of the ordinary. It was just normal for me, and that was my dad. It
That
wasn't
was your norm.
until older
Yeah.
cousins of mine had pointed out, like, hey, Desiree, what is your dad doing and why is he doing those things? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah, this is
you know?
yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of it I didn't recognize until other people had noticed it and maybe question, and then it made me question other things.
Right,
So
brought it
that's
to your
kind of how,
attention.
yeah, that's how a lot of things, or a lot of the ways that I am, even in fact, it's just other people kind of bringing it to my attention, and it's just me, I guess, finding that awareness and just taking that ownership of myself and trying to improve better as a person.
Right.
And yeah, that's pretty much when I noticed. And another thing that I recognize too in sharing my story, I know a lot of times people feel shame or guilt or they want to sweep it under the rug. For me, there was a point where I had decided, or recognized, I should say, that everything that I had been through was not because of me. It was done to me.
Right.
So I really honestly had nothing to be ashamed of. And I think that's why I find it fairly easy to share my story. And just because I have been sharing it for so long, uh, it's just something that I know gets people connected right away. A lot of times people tell me, like, oh, I feel really safe opening up to you. And I've had people open up to me right away, people that normally don't open up. And that's actually what I'm working towards right now is becoming like a peer support specialist and just counseling others in their journeys and showing them that they too can heal. It's not
That's
easy. It
amazing.
takes a lot of work, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That's amazing. That was another question I was going to ask you. Because we talk about healing and we talk about how it's an everyday thing for us. Like I don't think that we ever fully 100% say I'm
No.
healed,
Right.
from traumas.
Right.
So with you opening up and talking about your experiences, and that allows people, like you said, to share with you their experiences and ask your advice. How do you handle that? Does that trigger anything for you, or is that more of a therapeutic avenue for you if you're, by helping others? I know that you said that you wanted to, you wanted to seek that as a profession. So I'm just interesting because I know everybody handles that differently, especially when you're in different stages of your healing process.
Right.
How is that for you when, people open up and tell you their traumatic experience? Is that, sometimes I can imagine that that would be overwhelming at
Right.
times. How is that for you?
Um, for me, it's not so much triggering. I just feel like because I've done so much work on myself, and like I said, like for me personally, like I like to practice journaling, meditation, therapy, all kinds of things, and these are things that I've done over an extended period of years. And in doing that, I have done the work and I put it into myself, so those things no longer, I guess, control my life. And it's more so me. I'm in the driver's seat. Like I'll always have these little things, these little side seat drivers or whatever coming up from time to time. But all in all, overall, I'm able to just sort of live the life that I want to live, and I have my own control. So yeah, a lot of times when people are talking to me, I can tell that something's wrong. Like I'm hyper focused on something's going on.
Yeah.
And I'll usually like approach the person and just say like, "Hey, are you okay?" And if you're not, and if you want to talk, like I'm here for you. But if you don't, that's okay too. Like we can talk about whatever you want, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So you
So
would say that you're probably more aware
right,
because of what you've been through as a child.
right,
And, that kind of leads into young adulthood too, as well. You probably recognize signs of someone
yeah,
needing
just
help.
distress. Yeah.
Yeah.
I recognize signs of distress, and then I also do feel that helping others is therapeutic. I know that a lot of AA organizations, that's exactly what they kind of function around. Like they have mentors who have been sober for a very long time, and then they mentor new people who are dealing with sobriety.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like I've been so immersed in this culture of healing and everything, that I'm ready to like share this with other people. It's like this light that we all have as children. Mine was dulled down, and I had to clean it up and let it shine out again. And so I see that in other people. Like I see it in her light, and I see there's something there. And there's just like it just needs to a little digging, a little help,
Yeah.
a little reassurance, pushing, and feeding that inner child, and then they thrive, they shine. Like they come out of it and they're like, oh my gosh, like I've had people tell me great stories of mending relationships with their families because uh and to me, like that's rewarding, and I get excited for them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. And
Yeah.
so it's not just me healing me, it's me healing them. That makes me happy for them too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it.
That's amazing. Yeah, like, give you high
Mm-hmm.
fives for that one because that's definitely not for, not everybody can do that. And the fact that you have taken your experience, excuse me, and you're using that to help other people is just phenomenal. Do you have a relationship with your family, your father or your mother, if you don't mind me asking?
Um, so for me, I would say I always say I don't not have a relationship with them. But to be honest, I don't really see them on a regular basis. It's very rare. I think the last time I saw my father was maybe a year ago, if that. And in his situation now, he's pretty much in a hospice situation. Just all of the partying and everything that he's done to his body is finally catching up to him. Um, and so I don't really see him a whole lot. I mean, sometimes I would feel bad by that, but I honestly feel like for the first time in my life, me being 31, that I'm actually living for myself. Um, yeah, in 2020, a lot of growth happened and changed for me, as for a lot of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And that's when I set up the most boundaries for myself when it came to my family. And I respected those boundaries for myself, for my own peace of mind. Because literally, as an adult, I had housed my parents, my siblings at different times free of
Yeah.
charge.
Yeah.
And I had taken them on even as an adult. So, I was always kind of picking up everybody else's pieces, and I just kind of decided, like, okay, everyone's grown up now. It's time
Time.
to, yeah, cut the
Yeah.
cord. Uh, and then for my mom, I have my mom on my social media platforms. She knows and recognizes my strength and always has. And, she has even apologized to me at one point in her life when she was sober. And I told her that I appreciated her apology, but I don't know, like, if I could truly ever, like, let it go and forgive it.
Yeah.
I have learned forgiveness from my parents just because I recognize the fact that they are human just like me and anybody, and none of us are perfect. So really, me getting older, I humanized them, and it allowed me to forgive them, not for condoning what they had done to me,
Right.
but So yeah, I guess I would say I don't mind seeing my parents. It's not triggering. It's not really anything. Um, but to be totally honest, my parents and myself are just totally different people.
Right.
So I don't really see them a whole lot. It's kind of like the saying goes, you are who you hang with. And
Absolutely.
I'm a different woman than my mother. And so we don't really have a whole lot in common and
Yeah.
a whole lot to talk about and things like that. But
Well, and I think that's like what you said too. Like, I just want to really quickly just say that I'm
yeah,
I'm sorry to hear that about your father. But I commend you on your strength and the ability to recognize. And you talked about boundaries, and I think that that's starting to become a thing where we talk about that more and how important
right.
it is for us as humans to recognize our boundaries and realize what is best for ourselves, like self-care, you know.
Yes,
And
definitely.
it's not selfish, and I think that we need to make
Be
that more
more open.
normalized.
Yeah,
Yeah,
be
that
more
it's not.
open to that.
Yeah, be more open and like normalize boundaries and normalize like
Exactly.
self-care can be cutting off, if you want to use those words, or
Toxic people, yeah.
moving away, or backing up from that, and that's okay. And if you, unfortunately, if you have to lose people in the process because you're growing, then that is,
It's
that's,
okay.
it's
Yeah.
okay. Yes,
Yeah, it
it's
is.
okay. So I have a few questions that I ask all of my guests, so I want to ask you a few things, and
Okay.
yeah, we'll jump right into that. So if you can remember, how would you describe your ambitions as a child, and how you saw yourself and what you were capable of as a person?
I guess when I was a child, I always knew that I had this natural nurturing role within me. And I kind of felt like I was different than everybody else. I don't know why, but I just always had this sort of resilience. So in life, whenever I was at my lowest of lows, I always knew, like, I have been, like, I would always tell myself, like, okay, Desiree, like, you've been through so much, like, you're going to get over
Yeah.
this. And so I
Yeah.
always truly 100% believed that in my heart. And I would overcome whatever it was that I was faced with. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's a good way to have. That's a great mindset, and for you
Yeah.
to realize that at a young age, that's
Yeah.
just fantastic. Um, what would you say has been your stickiest struggle that has stuck with you on your journey?
I would say that it's the trauma. Like,
Yeah.
it's something that I can't escape from. It's definitely made me who I am, but there are parts of that where it's just like this unsure. I always have this unsure feeling or unsure sense of myself. So it's kind of like the opposite of what I just said,
Yeah.
but I always say, like, I'm such a contradiction to my own self.
No, like everybody has, like,
Right?
you have ambitions, and then you say, like, I still do have that little thing that's like lingering up here that like
Exactly.
peeks
Yeah.
its head out every now and then, and that's
Right.
completely
Right.
completely natural. piggybacking off of that, as an adult, how do you feel like that had the trauma that we carry that with us? You know, I would say probably for the rest of our life, whether we carry it in the front or we carry it in the back, but it's still there. How do you think that that's shaped you as an adult? And if you, I don't know if you have children, but if you plan to have children, how do you feel like that's affected you as far as being a parent?
Um, Actually, I just found out that I'm pregnant, so this will be my first child. Yay!
Ah, yay!
Yeah.
I'm so excited for you. That's amazing. Yay! So yeah, that's a perfect question for you.
Yeah.
How do you feel like that what you've learned and what you've experienced is that gonna how is that going to help you in the future with the child?
Well, the one thing that I've recognized that others recognize about me as well is I even went to a psychic at one point, and she had told me that children are your tribe. So it's like everybody has like this group or this squad, you know, and for me it's children. And I think just at that young, early age, me being so nurturing and caring for my siblings, a lot of times older siblings sometimes don't take on that role. You know, sometimes they become abusive because of their environment.
Right. They see that this is the way that it is.
Right.
Kind of,
and
like you
so,
said, take on that role.
me as an adult, I do have my own nieces and nephews, and I actually didn't think that I could conceive a child because I had been trying the past 8 years.
Wow.
So I was actually made my peace with just being an aunt, and like in my room here, you'll see this is like my little office slash playroom for whenever my nieces come over. So yeah, I just feel like with kids, I have this natural connection to them. I've always had like this dream of maybe being like a little kindergarten, preschool teacher, just something, anything with children. They make me happy, you know.
Yeah.
I can't be sad around them. They're just so innocent, and I recognize and understand how important healthy childhood is.
Right.
That when I am around them, my whole personality transforms for them, and I'm like, "You're awesome. Let's play. Let's whatever." So my nieces and nephews, they love coming here. I don't want to brag or anything, but I'm definitely their favorite aunt. And
That's awesome.
yeah, like we definitely have special connections. Their parents get jealous and they'll be like, "They're traitors." But
I love that. That's amazing. They're just like, I can't help it. I just, it's in my nature.
They're my tribe. Yeah. So I'm definitely excited to be a mother. It's scary. I always say like being a parent is like one of the most selfless things a person can do, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's definitely going to be an interesting journey, but I'm so glad that I have my husband to take this journey with, because he has always been my number one supporter. Like, he believed in me before I ever believed in myself, and we've been together for such a long time that this is going to be like a magical thing for us.
Yes, I'm so excited for you. Like, this is fantastic, fantastic news. I'm a new mom myself. I have a 6-month-old, so like I'm totally over here like, you got this.
Awesome.
That's amazing. So we like to talk about stepping into our own power and not thinking of that as a bad thing. I know a lot of times people think of powerful people and it's just carried this bad stigma. How would you think, or how would you describe the power that you have to try and step into every day?
I would say that it's challenging, the power that I do have to step into every day, because I do actually suffer from depression and anxiety and different things. It's not who I am, it's just what I have.
Yeah.
And some days are more challenging than others, but I've also recognized the fact that I'm human and I'm going to have bad days. And sometimes even just getting up to just take a shower or brush your teeth is a huge victory.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's all about celebrating the little victories. And, the following day is a new day. So it's all about just kind of living in the present moment.
Yes. So many people say that. I love that you said that. I've had so many guests say that, today is today.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is a new day. So, yeah, I love that. And my husband, he's like a huge advocate of like, he tells me that all the time. He's like, it's just, live every day as today,
It
and
is,
tomorrow's a
yeah.
new day. So if you're having a bad one, it's gonna get better. Like, that's
Right.
amazing. I love that you said that. Like, it's perfect. What's the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
Hmm. Honestly, I think what has really helped me in my journey is realizing that I only have control of myself. So before, I always wanted to control everything or everyone or wondered what people
Right.
were thinking, and that drives anybody mad.
Yes.
So I just think that worrying about what's in your control versus what's out of your control is a huge part in healing and growing, and just it's so awesome for anybody if you can recognize that.
Yes.
um, a lot of times the way somebody speaks to you or what they say is a projection of how they're feeling on the inside or how they treat or speak to themselves. So a lot of those times I don't take things personally. That's the same for my social media. Like the negative comments, they don't have an effect over me because I recognize that person's either hurt, lashing
Yeah.
out, or triggered.
Yeah.
And the events of seeing my story, or maybe sometimes when they see these stories, I don't know, maybe they feel like there's this worse, so they did it different. Or,
Yeah.
like I said, it can be triggering. So, again, I just think that learning to control your own emotions and what you do have control over, letting yourself fixate on that versus everything else is like the best piece of advice I've ever been given.
Awesome. Yeah, that is so true. I think I feel like it was. I don't want to like misquote anybody, so I'm not going to say who said it.
Right.
But I heard someone say one time that like have compassion for those people that have negative things to say, because like you said, you don't know what someone's going through. Whether they may have been triggered, they may not understand, and yeah, like just you just kind of have to like brush it off and move
Right.
on. So like, yeah.
Yeah.
So my last question for you is, what's the best piece of advice you would give a younger version of yourself who was in the thick of their struggle if you had a few moments with them?
If I saw my younger self, oh my gosh. I think, first of all, I would just want to hug her
Yeah.
and just
Aw.
hold her. But I would definitely tell her amazing things like about herself
Yeah.
and just feed her inner spirit. Like I think that's what's important for children is like
Right.
we just nurture them and just try to feed on whatever positivity because they're children. They shouldn't be worrying about other things.
Yeah.
So definitely if I saw my younger self, it would just be more of a nurturing experience and
Yeah.
just
I
that.
love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's such good advice. I
Yeah.
think that we could probably all totally connect with that. If we had a
Definitely.
moment with our younger self, we would just be like, it's gonna be okay. Like, you're stronger than you realize you are, and like, let me
Right.
give you a hug. I
I'm
know I
here for
could have
you.
definitely, yes, I could
Yeah.
have definitely used some adult Jessica hugs when I was younger. So
Right.
I love
Yeah.
that. That is fantastic. Well, I want to thank you endlessly on the behalf of our team and every single person who heard your story and connected with it. After this podcast, I will be heading straight to my easel and creating a painting that represents what I personally felt and saw from your amazing story of transformation. If anyone is interested in seeing that process and getting one of the few limited prints, as a reminder to step into your own power, you can do that on my website. Also, I'm going to link Desiree's TikTok. And I feel like I saw, did you create your group for your trauma support group yet?
I don't like. I
Okay.
just go on there randomly. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I will link her TikTok. You guys can give her a follow. She's super inspirational, super motivating. And then also to you, if you're a little bit more interested in some of the more detailed videos, you do have those up about your childhood, and so you can
Yeah.
check those out. And then and I'm sure I could probably speak for you when you say and reach out if you need to talk.
Definitely.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Desiree. You have been an amazing guest, and your
Thank you so
story
much for
is
having me. I had fun.
I'm glad you did. You're such a courageous person, and so yeah. If you personally felt connected to her story and you would like to purchase one of the limited edition prints that goes along with it and helps support the podcast, you can do so at jessicajames.com. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at I Am Power Club. And of course, like and subscribe to the video and the channel so that you don't miss next week's episode of I Am Power. See you then.